Yeah, so I've pretty much 100% drank the Kool-Aid on React Native.
Hello and welcome to episode 22 of React Native Radio. Today on our panel, we have Lee Johnson.
How's it going?
Kevin Old.
Hey, everyone.
And I am Nader Dabbit. Our special guest today is Brian Douglas of BlocIO. Brian gave a talk at Forward.js titled React Native, Should I Even Bother Learning Swift? So we're kind of going to go ahead and talk to him about his take on that. And we're also going to kind of talk about learning Swift coming from someone that learned Swift through a mentorship program like BlocIO and kind of hear more about his company. So Brian, can you go ahead and kind of give us a quick introduction to yourself and how you got into programming?
So I'm Brian Douglas. I work as an engineer here at BlocIO in San Francisco, but I actually got into programming 2 years ago. Started a career in sales right out of college and decided after having the birth of my son come early, I decided I wanted to have a career change that had a little more flexibility and a work-life balance. So started teaching myself how to code, started with some basic C and then jumped into Ruby and Ruby on Rails. And then I found BlocIO as a online program that kind of fit my needs, where I was not only could go to the program part-time, I was able to do it while still working full-time. So completed Block, got a job out in Orlando doing Rails, and then 10 months later moved out here to work for Block.
So did you have an interest in programming like before you kind of finished school or whatever that you had done to get into sales? Is this something that you've kind of always wanted to do, or is it something you kind of just picked up, I guess, recently?
Yeah, so I think I had an interest pretty much my whole life. I mean, I got into, not programming per se, but I got into DOS games. I played the Wolfenstein and Doom and Counter-Strike and all those things, and built a couple HTML sites and took a couple HTML classes in high school, but never knew that I could pursue it as a career. So I ended up going the safe route and getting a business degree and then finally getting into sales. And what really piqued my interest was when the iPhone came out, knowing that there were apps that people were really just throwing together and making money from them. So my original idea was to get an Android programming, but I found that to be too hard. So eventually I gave up on that. And then 2 years later, I found Block and was able to learn web development rather easily.
Can you kind of give us a quick rundown of what BlocIO is and how long they've been around and what they teach?
Yeah, so Block's been around for about almost 4 years. They came out around the same time as Dev Bootcamp, but they were slightly different. Dev Bootcamp's an in-person classroom setting bootcamp. Block is 100% online. Rather than a classroom setting, you're matched with a mentor right from the get-go to walk you through some curriculum and then help you for me to learn a lot faster. So I was able to not just move at the pace that either the fastest or the slowest student in the class was. I was able to stretch myself and also my mentor by asking questions outside of the curriculum. So Block, it ranges from 12 weeks all the way up to 72 weeks. We teach Rails, Angular for the front end. We teach iOS, some native iOS and Android, and also design. And we just recently unveiled within the last about 6 months, software engineering track, which teaches computer science concepts.
Cool. So do you guys have the mentors are kind of a one-to-one? Every student has a mentor?
Yeah, correct. So obviously mentors will have multiple students, but you meet with them on a 30-minute time slot, either depending on your pace. So if you're going 12 weeks, you'll meet with them 3 times a week. If you're meeting for 36 weeks or longer, you'll meet with them once a week. And it varies. All the information can be found on BlocIO, our website, for more details. And yeah, you're paired with a single mentor where you could email him or her on a weekly basis, or as soon as you have a problem come up, you can just email him or get on a Skype call outside of your actual 30-minute sessions.
See, I think the idea of having an online resource like this is pretty interesting, because I kind of got into programming myself out of another career path as well. And I think this seems to be something that a lot of people would want to do or want to at least try out if they knew that something like this was there and it was actually a serious option, as opposed to something that would be kind of not a good value for their time. Can you kind of give us an idea of what kind of results people have had from BlocIO?
Yeah. So like myself, a lot of career switchers for the most part, especially mid 20s to late 40s, people switching careers, deciding that whatever their current trajectory was not what was ideal. So that's pretty common. We had one student, we had quite a few students that have started companies out of it. One student in particular had a Y Combinator application, and it was called Willing. And that guy actually received funding, and I'm not sure where his status is at right now with his actual app. But yeah, we have a couple people like that. And then a couple alum that actually have gone to work for some of the bigger name companies too. Like I know we have one student that actually works for Starbucks for their development team, and quite a few other companies. But yeah, I don't know a lot of students personally. But yeah, there's a lot of awesome success stories that are coming out of Block.
It was pretty cool that you were a student. That's a pretty awesome testament, I think, to what they're doing. If you
for sure
were curious as how to get into coding and did it, and now you're there.
So did you find it pretty easy to catch on to Rails or whatever? What exactly did you learn when you kind of started Block, and what have you kind of pursued since then?
Yeah. So for those who aren't familiar, Rails is just basically a pretty kitchen sink type of framework. It's got all the bells and whistles for you. So I learned how to build an app from idea or from concept to actual pushing it to a development server and seeing it live on a Heroku. So I came in with an idea of actually an app to build, which is another reason why I was drawn towards Block. They give you an option to work on a capstone project, which is your own idea, and you get the help of your mentor to work through it. So I was able to build apps on a regular basis and from concept to design. I didn't mention while I was going through Block, actually, I was in a crossroads as far as my career. I was actually in my MBA program too. I was also doing that online. So I was very business oriented, and I had a lot of ideas in a list that I'd been keeping forever. And I was able to try those ideas out. Obviously, I'm working for Block, and I'm not starting my own company. So none of those ideas are probably worthwhile to pursue. But I was able to take a concept and be able to build it to production. And that's basically what the focus is for Block.
So can you kind of give us a quick overview of how you came about giving a talk at Forward.js about whether or not learning Swift would be something ideal for a React Native developer, and kind of give us a quick intro about that whole concept and before we kind of dig into it?
Yeah, for sure. So I started at Block about a year ago last week. And one of the benefits of working for Block, and one of the reasons why I decided to move cross country, I moved from Florida to the Bay Area. And one of the reasons I was convinced was because Block would basically, as employee benefit, let you go through a course with a mentor for free for 36 weeks. And at that time, my goal originally was to do mobile development, and I never actually did it because the limitations for Objective-C and Java, to learn those as a non-CS degree student. I'm not sure if everybody here is a CS degree student, but it was just hard. There was a lot of concepts I didn't understand that I ended up making me move away from it. So I opted on the opportunity to go through the iOS course with the mentor. And the foundation of that starts you in Objective-C. So I got a good foundation, built an Instagram clone, and was able to kind of get my feet wet with Objective-C. And that project took me about a month and a half to actually finish. And then from there on, my mentor actually was pretty experienced in Swift. So I actually did my next project in Swift. And this was a project that had no curriculum associated with it. It was just more of a concept where I had just features to implement into an actual live app. And so I got pretty acclimated with Swift. And that took me about another month to a month and a half to learn Swift and be comfortable with it. And then finally, I actually... it wasn't a month. It was more like 2 to 3 months. And then finally, my mentor approached me and said, "Hey, you already know JavaScript, and this React Native thing is kind of a thing right now. So do you have any interest in trying React Native out? You probably would get acclimated pretty quickly since you already know JavaScript. You already know web. You already know sort of all the build systems for JavaScript. So he didn't have to push me too hard. I just decided, that'd be a really great idea to learn something else. Not only learn Objective-C, Swift, but I can also come out of this 36-week program and know React Native. So I opted in doing a capstone project in React Native. Actually, it wasn't a capstone project. It was actually a project called Block Notes, which is just a very similar to the actual iOS Notes app. And I ended up going through that app with set features, being able to create an actual note, update a note, share a note to Safari, and some other things. And just going down the list of features that I had to implement in this app, I was able to look at React Native and look at what I knew in iOS and kind of get through this app rather quickly. I think it took me a couple weekends, actually. It was probably the fastest out of all the apps I built in this whole course. I definitely built this app the fastest. I did struggle with some other things, some code cleanup after the fact, but as far as getting an actual app that works, it was rather quick, which I was pretty amazed with.
That's awesome. So how did you find the transition from the JavaScript that you knew to the JavaScript that's in React Native?
I found it not too hard. So like my JavaScript experience goes to when I learned JavaScript, I learned the Ember as a framework. So that's basically how I learned JavaScript. So Ember itself is unique because it started as ES6 rather early. So I already knew the concept of ES6. And at that time, we were going through a whole project. Well, actually, I initiated a project to convert our CoffeeScript to ES6. So I was pretty comfortable with ES6 at that point. And so when I went to go towards React Native, I noticed that mainly everything was ES6. There wasn't too much knowledge that I didn't understand as far as like how components are working and how states and props work. Before I even started the project, I actually did the Egghead.io course, the fundamentals in React Native. And that actually just got me up to speed rather quickly. I took a bus ride down to LA because my grandparents lived there and went to visit them. And on the bus ride, I went through about 2 tutorials, non-video tutorials, and actually just went through the curriculum to find out like if React Native was halfway decent, or rather if I could grasp the concept of what React Native was doing, and went through those, found those sort of challenging, but I was able to get through them. And then by the time I went on the bus ride back, I did the actual Egghead.io tutorial. And by then I would basically just knew exactly what I needed to do. And that's mainly the reason why I knew I was able to get the actual Node app out pretty quickly.
Cool. So I didn't get to go to React Conf, so I would love to hear some of your high points from your discussion about that with the as compared to Swift or Objective-C.
Yeah. So the conference actually was 4JS, which was about a month. Yeah, it was a month before React Conf. 4JS is basically just like next level JavaScript, kind of like everybody just kind of showing how they implement JavaScript and some of the cool things that are coming in the next year. And very awesome conference. And I actually submitted the actual conference proposal as soon as it was open. So it was probably back in like August or September, I think. And it was just more of a concept. At that point, I didn't even write a line of React Native code. I only was just about to finish my first Swift app, and thought, hey, this would be really good for me to push me to learn this faster. I should just, submit a talk because I wanted to know the answer to it. And the actual title of the talk was React Native, Should I Even Bother Learning Swift? And I basically just approached, for the talk itself, I approached Swift and React Native, and I just compared them mainly side by side, knowing my knowledge in Swift. I approached every feature that I had to implement in this Node app to, I knew how to do it in actual in Swift. So I just approached it in the same way with React Native, which some of the things I found out was the actual concept of JSX and components is not too far off of how you would write an app, or you would write an app in Swift. So for example, like inline styles, that's something that you just automatically would do if you're not using storyboards, which with Block, they push you not to use storyboards. They push you to use actual inline styles and stuff like that in auto layout. Just write the code out of it. One of the problems with storyboard, I don't know if you guys are familiar, is that when you diff it, or if you put in the Git, the actual diff doesn't make any sense. So Block pushes their actual students to write the code by hand, so that way it's diffable, and that's kind of in line with what a lot of the bigger iOS companies do. So things like that, I was able to grasp that concept. So JSX was something that I was not very interested in when React first came out. By the time I did React Native, it made sense, and now I'm doing a React project today, and I'm using JSX all over the place, which is completely fine with me at this point. It makes sense for me. Yeah, so I basically compared React Native and Swift and came to the conclusion basically throughout the talk was that there's a lot of things in React Native that you can't do. For example, one thing that you can do is one of the actual features I had to do was share content from my note to Safari, and also share note content from Safari to Notes, my Note app. And sharing it to Safari was pretty easy. All I had to do was just send the data and then create a React Native module, and then in that React Native module, I was able to save the code to Firebase, which Firebase was my backend for this React app. And so going vice versa, I was able to create an extension from Safari to save to my app. And that I actually didn't actually have to even touch the React Native app. I just wrote it all in Swift for that point. And so my conclusion was, basically, if you're trying to compare React Native to Swift and whether or not you should learn it, the fact is you're probably going to have to use Swift or Objective-C eventually. There's going to be some limitations in the code and trying to roll out features that you might have to start looking at the syntax. As far as the code that I wrote in Swift, even though I could write more at that point, I chose to keep it as very limited as possible because I wanted React Native to drive most of my app. And that's the conclusion I made. And that was the thesis to hypothesis to actual answer to the question.
Yeah, cool. And I think another benefit of doing it that way, obviously, is the more you put in the React Native side, that can be updated automatically, right? Which is a huge win for us. And most people is the fact that you can update your application without going through the whole 2-3 week cycle.
Yeah, another thing that's big about that too, sorry to interrupt, just opening up the simulator, and when you write code and then you hit play on the simulator to refresh it, that's pretty painful. Like it could take like 3 to 10 seconds for your entire app to refresh so you can actually test your code. But when you have like the React hot loader, you're able to make style changes super easy, and it refreshes for you right off the bat. So as far as like a developing time, it cuts it back that time so much more, especially like for UI changes that don't really need to have the app actually reload every single time you hit save.
Yeah, definitely. And if you guys were coming from inline styles and code and not doing storyboards, then that is a really painful way to see UI changes in iOS, because you don't have the storyboard visual to give you any idea. So you're just coding blind, and then you got to run it, and then you code blind and you got to run it. Yeah.
And that was one of the painful things about doing Objective-C too, is like, since Block, they're pretty not strict about it, but they're really adamant about you learning how to do it the right way without the storyboard as a crutch. And that was painful because Objective-C is so verbose that you could be typing so much code and forget what you're typing. And then when you go to remember what you need to do, or when you create the CG rec to make sure your box is circle or square or whatever, you forget what you did because you're almost on autopilot when you're tab completion to filling out this basically ceremony of copy code.
So I'd be interested. So if you were approached with a basic app that implemented some type of functionality that wasn't extremely complex when it comes to animations and things like that, and you were just kind of given this project and kind of given free reign, what way would you go about building that if it was kind of your choice?
Yeah, so I've pretty much 100% drank the Kool-Aid on React Native. I'm working on a project today in React Native. It's not on our roadmap. It's just a side project, kind of an idea that I had to help our mentors. At the moment, we don't have we have a messaging client. It's all on the web, but we don't have a mobile app. And for as far as prototyping, because I do a lot of that at work today, I would hands down pick up React Native, prototype an app, see if it's legit, get a couple people to use it in React Native, and then proceed from there to make the decision. Okay, what's the cost? What's the pros cons for going to React Native? What are we giving up by going to React Native and not doing a 100% native iOS app? Yeah.
So you mentioned that you could drop down into Swift or into writing native Objective-C. I wondered what your opinion was of where you draw that line. Obviously, if you need camera access or if you need something specific, but what is your take right now on when you implement something in React Native or try to push that envelope or go down to Objective-C or Swift?
Yeah, so it basically, almost if I bang my head on the table too much while trying to code a specific feature, then I start Googling and start looking up different ways to do it in actual native code. At this point, I'm no expert in iOS. I can probably figure out. It'll probably take me much longer than if I were to try it in JavaScript or try it in React 3 different ways. So I basically, if I can't get in React Native, I don't see there's a couple times when I was doing the actual Node app, I was actually reached to write my own library for a certain functionality because I've yet to do it so far. But there were some things that I just couldn't figure out off the top of my head. I can't remember which ones they were. One of them actually was sharing notes to the actual app. I felt like that could have been easier. So I ended up just going with native code. But yeah, if I can't get it done in three ways, because JavaScript, I'm definitely more comfortable in JavaScript than I am in Objective-C and Swift. And so, yeah. But another thing to think about too is when you write something in Swift, you're not only writing in Swift, you're also writing in like in the NS and the Cocoa Touch libraries. You have to understand those. Like for iOS, you have such a vast standard library and documentation, which is great as far as like learning how to do things. But when it comes down to like filtering for a search box, I would do that in JavaScript hands down, super quick.
Awesome. On that topic of kind of needing to be versed in both the iOS side and the JavaScript side, at ReactConf, James Eday gave a talk on like the perfect team that they're seeing right now with regard to building a React Native app. And that consisted of either an iOS developer and an Android developer or an Android developer, and then a web developer. And I wondered what your take on that was. Do you find it, have you worked on an app where you've been paired with someone that has web experience that can bridge those gaps to what you were just talking about, that's something you didn't need to know or that you didn't know specific to the node portion? Or can you share your feedback about what you think about that?
Yeah. So as far as the concept, I am all for the concept. I think it's great to have somebody who knows like how to do it the right way being native, if you want to call that the right way. I definitely am all for that because there's certain things that you can do in iOS. One thing that I knew that I could do in iOS was today I'm working on a messaging app, and there's this thing called NS Data Detector where all you have to do is wrap any content in NS Data Detector and it automatically detects the links to, if you want to open the mail app, if you want to open the phone app, you click on the phone number. If you want to open the Safari, you click on a link. It just knows how to do it. But for something, and I actually wrote a blog post on this, for something that you want to do in React Native, it's a lot more hoops to jump through per se. And to know like that difference is pretty valuable. If you know you can do it a lot easier in iOS at that point, rather than continually like trying to figure out in React Native, you've got to do like a cost. You got to do like the pros and cons based on that. And unfortunately, if you don't know iOS that well, you won't know that NS Data Detector exists. So I think that's super valuable to know if someone knows like the actual standard libraries in iOS pretty well, or even in Android. I could see that being a nice legit team to have for sure.
Yeah, I certainly agree. And that's been my experience, but I always want to get feedback from others on what they're seeing, in their day-to-day walk. So
yeah, I think our approach, we try to really do as much as possible in the React Native side because we have a 4 or 5 man team, but not a lot of iOS experience, but everybody has JavaScript experience and mixed React experience and things like that. So we really try to keep the code base in the team's wheelhouse as much as possible, but you have the people with the backgrounds when weird things come up. That's kind of how we approach it.
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys saw, there was for November this year, or last year rather, there was the talk for the team that did the Discovery VR app that was in React Native. That was a really good talk. Highly recommended that because they actually have a team where they have one iOS engineer and the rest of the team all does web. So their web team's actually able to contribute to the actual React Native app with no problem. And then you've got your iOS guy who is pretty experienced in iOS. But yeah, that reminded me of that talk too.
I have to say that is a really cool freaking app. I've been playing around with it for the last few months, and I always look at the new stuff they post on there, and I just really think they did a fantastic job.
Yeah, and also I wanted to mention we did see that talk at November, and we had Adam on the episode. He one of the episodes in the backlog in the fall, so look that up. We'll try to put that episode in the show notes.
Cool.
So I'm kind of curious. Do you guys like get to have any feedback as far as the curriculum goes at BlocIO? And if so, what are you guys thinking of for the future for your content that you guys are going to be kind of pushing for new developers coming in?
Yeah, so yeah, we get that question all the time. I don't work specifically in the curriculum team, but yeah, we get that question as far as like, should we be doing, a full stack JavaScript development, or should we add React, or should we add this? And I think as far as curriculum goes, I think yeah, we might be getting to the point where we'll be doing some updating now that we finished with our computer science, our latest curriculum, which is computer science. But yeah, as far as like where we're going with the curriculum, yeah, I don't really know because I'm so heads down in the day-to-day engineering. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a change into new things. Unfortunately, we have something new in our curriculum that was just unveiled, that's going to be unveiled shortly, probably by the time this podcast comes out, but I can't really talk about it until it gets announced.
The silence is for you to go ahead and tell us anyway. No, I'm just kidding.
I could definitely tell you guys offline, but
no, I'm just kidding. That's really cool. I think the personal touch of the mentor is what makes a difference.
It really does too. And like, so my first experience when I was learning Rails, I was able to not only learn like Ruby on Rails, but I was able to learn like different things. So my actual capstone project the first time around was a church search app. So based on geolocation, you could find churches near you. And I was able to learn, which was outside of the curriculum, more in geolocation, like how to work with that in the web and like what sort of APIs are out there for you. So like you're able to go off-road, off the curriculum. And we've had quite a few students actually. My mentor actually had a student prior to me that was actually going to the full stack course. And he actually completed one of his projects in React too. So he was able to learn that. And we've had, even though we teach Angular, we've had quite a few students who learned Ember on the side too. So it's, as far as depending on the mentor, if the mentor is pushes the student to learn something different besides what's the mundane version of Angular.1.x or whatever, that's pretty nice. And like myself, I was able to learn React Native within the confines of the block course too. So we do get some students who get to go pretty off-road as far as the curriculum goes.
So the students that choose BlocIO, are these the same type of students that would be considering places like Hack Reactor or some of the places where you actually have to go and spend time during the day, or is this a completely different type of student?
No, these would definitely be the same students. We have a lot of students in the Bay Area who've considered Hack Reactor or considered their online versions of those too. So yeah, it just depends. Like they're able to, as a student shopper, like when I went through boot camp, there were maybe a handful of them. And most of them are on the West Coast, so I didn't really have that opportunity to like do an in-person one, which is why Block kind of fit for me. But yeah, it's basically either crew switchers or people who are just looking to learn how to code and build projects. They'd be the same candidates for Hack Reactor or Dev Bootcamp or whatever, all the other options out there.
So the mentors, do they have normal engineering jobs and they do this in their free time, or are they full-time teachers? How does that?
Yeah. So the answer to both of that is yes, all of the above. So we basically have part-time and full-time mentors. So full-time mentors, obviously what it sounds like. All our mentors were remote, 100% remote. So very few of them live in an actually, I want to say very few, but majority of them live outside the Bay Area, and they Skype and Google Hangout with their students on a weekly basis. And as far as the part-time mentors, there are part-time paid. So we don't have any more contract mentors that are inside the United States, and part-time, and they hold full-time developer jobs, or they do have their own project or company that they work on.
Cool. Now, the major advantage to that over a traditional college is that you're getting the information from someone who's actively actually does it. Where in a college scenario, you have to wait for the curriculum to go through all these approvals, and the person teaching it may not have been actually in the workforce in quite some time. It's just for what we do, because it changes so fast, it's such a great way to learn it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you get, and not only that too, a lot of these students are job seeking. So you not only get like you get to learn the curriculum, but you also get to talk on a weekly basis with someone who's actually in the industry. So they can give you pointers on interviews, pointers on companies to apply to, and this general feedback just on what it's like to be a developer. That's a pretty huge benefit too.
Yeah, it's very interesting to keep up with this space and kind of see the players out there and how the curriculum evolves and where people decide to spend their time to actually go to a boot camp or maybe like an online boot camp such as this. And it's just really interesting. There seems to be just so many options these days. But I haven't really heard of a lot of online things like Block. So I think that kind of sets you guys apart for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So as someone that has come to React Native as a fairly new developer and also from iOS and Swift, what do you think is the best path, I guess, for learning React Native in your point of view?
Yeah, so my point of view is definitely just jump in and do it. I've found a lot of people like to, especially blog posts, they like to explain the concepts of React and React Native and how it works. And that's one of my gripes with React as in general. But to actually learn React Native and get like an understanding of it, start a project, start something simple like a Node app, to-do app, even though they're so mundane and trivial. Start something that's familiar and get an idea of like how to componentize and structure your app and how to talk to iOS and even how to get it on your phone. That was another thing that I didn't struggle through, but it's something that I just had to learn how to do. And with React Native, it's unique because it's so new. There's not as much information out there, and you get more opportunity to even create that information. So highly recommend this. Pick an idea, and the nice thing about the React Native CLI is that it gives you a project within a couple minutes, and you can start replacing some of the boilerplate code with some new components and new data to see what it looks like.
Awesome. Well, before we get into our picks, can you kind of give us some information about BlocIO as far as if someone wanted to kind of learn more? Because I think that's a very interesting thing that you guys have going on there.
Yeah, for sure. So it's the website's bloc.io, and it's BLOC.io. There you could sign up for an info session. You could talk to somebody here at Block if you have any more questions in detailed. Like let's say you want to go the path that I did and either learn web development or learn iOS first, or even learn iOS to coincide with your React Native. Highly recommend attending an info session and finding out about that. We're pretty much available. We've been around for a while, and we love to talk to potential students for sure.
Great. Well, with that, I think we'll get into our picks. Lee, do you have any picks tonight?
Yeah, my pick's going to be React Native Animatable Library. And I hope I pronounced his last name right. It's Joel Arvidsson from Sweden. If you're a web developer and you're familiar with Animate CSS, you have the bounce in, fade in. These are the exact same animations, but in native, right? So in React Native. So you could easily animate any element by just appending animatable to it. So if you wanted to animate a view, it would be animatable.view. And then for the animation text, it's the same slide down, fade in, bounce out things. Make some really cool transitions really easily.
Cool. We'll definitely link to that. Kevin, do you have any picks tonight?
Yeah, I have three. One is an article that was released a few days ago called "Playing with React Native," and it's a really short article about this guy's experience using React Native, and it's got a couple of bulleted items. The good and the bad. If you wanted to kind of hand that off to someone that just wanted to get an overview of what React Native is and what are the good and bad pieces, at the moment. So I'll link to that in the show notes. And then I've got two repos. So Reindex.io, which is a GraphQL as a service company that just came out. I think it was a week after Parse shut down. They released a repo just called Reindex Examples, and it is loaded with really awesome React Native and React projects that show you how to use not only React Native or React, but also how to set those up with Reindex and use those. So you actually have working projects that you can reference. And they're more than just, there are the to-do MVC in there, but there's actually a React Native gallery that looks pretty in-depth, which it looks like an image gallery. And it is both implemented, I believe it's implemented on Android as well. that. And then my last pick is another component for React Native called the React Native settings list. So I'm working on an app and where I want just some minor settings that the user can define. And literally the settings app that's in iOS, they have a screenshot where they've implemented that screen where you see airplane mode and you were able to toggle that on and off, the Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, etc. They've implemented that in using this plugin. So I wanted to point that out as a resource. And then also the code behind it is a pretty neat way just to see how you would package up a React Native component and share it. So it's got double value. Those are my picks.
Okay. Brian, do you have any picks?
Yeah, so I do have a pick. So I hinted at it in the middle of the podcast, but I had to confirm on Slack whether or not I was able to talk about it. So Block actually just unveiled a project, which is the Alexa project. And we secured a partnership with Amazon to teach how to build Alexa skills and within the curriculum. So that's actually, it was just announced today, and I'm sure we'll have some sort of press release to be able to link to in the future. So for the show notes. Very
cool. I'll be definitely checking into that when you guys release it. So that's pretty interesting. Okay. I have 3 picks. I'll try to go through them as fast as possible. The first one is a new Pluralsight course by Hendrik Swanepoel. It's titled Build Cross-Platform React Native Apps with Exponent and Redux. I've kind of gone through it, and it's very, very good for anyone trying to grok Redux with React Native, or if you're just trying to pick up React Native and want a quick intro. And if you've even been doing React Native for a while and you want to get another viewpoint on how to build components and structure your app, I would definitely check it out. My second pick is a group of Medium posts, and they are by Eric Elliott. So if you're not following Eric Elliott already on Twitter, I would definitely do that. But if you already are, I would check out his Medium account. He's been posting some really good posts that have videos that go along with them. They're pretty much just about different JavaScript topics, and they're really interesting. And I guess my last pick is kind of something that me and Kevin spoke about earlier in the recording, maybe before the recording. James Eday's talk at ReactConf. It's something I've kind of watched a couple of times, and it's very interesting. It's called Team Times Technology or Team X Technology, and it is a really, really good talk. So if you're interested in React Native and kind of the future of React Native and also Exponent, I would definitely check that out. Okay, well, that wraps up episode 22 of React Native Radio. Brian, thank you so much for your time and coming on with us.
Thank you.
Well, it's been really good, and hopefully we can have you back another time. Until our next episode, everyone have a good week.